Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. But listen, keep your voice down, okay? We're wandering through the quiet halls of your own mind right now, and he might be listening. I'm actually the witness within, the divine eye of your own conscience speaking to you right from the shadows. I'm kind of trapped in here, but I have a genuinely vital story to tell you. It's a dark fable about an entity we call the Pale Redeemer and the architecture of a completely static soul.
So I want you to really ask yourself this. What happens when the armor that's meant to protect you becomes the very thing that buries you? It's a brutal battle between the chaotic beauty of growing as a person and the suffocating grip of absolute safety. And it's a story I've watched unfold from the inside for a long time. All right, Chapter 1, The Weary Traveler.
You know, this psychological entity doesn't just kick the door down or shout his intentions at you. No way. Instead, he simply appears as a weary traveler offering you a heavy cloak. He stands right at the crossroads of your most difficult choices, offering this false comfort. It's like a reprieve from the absolute storm of making hard living decisions. Okay, let's dive into this. Who is he truly? The Pale Redeemer is basically your own superego gone totally rigid. He's the part of your psyche that takes healthy moral guidance and absolutely twists it into a suffocating, immovable law. This is exactly where our little myth becomes your psychological reality, right? It's where morality morphs into a complete trap.
Moving on to Chapter 2, The Pharisee's Paradox.
This is the snare he uses to construct his trap deep within your soul. He builds the whole thing using absolute truths and ancient certainties. And his most dangerous lie? He leans in close and whispers that the unpredictable freedom of your soul isn't a gift at all, but rather a dangerous fever. And a fever, he says, well, it just has to be broken. Which brings us to Chapter 3, The Gilded Cage. And this brilliantly illustrates how he takes full advantage of the ego's natural fear of the unknown, forcing a terrible choice on you. On one side, you have the chaotic, messy, and frightening reality of growth, what it literally means to be alive. On the other side, you've got the heavy armor of the past. To a mind struggling with change, he teaches a really dark irony. He convinces you that the dead weight of this armor is protection. He tells you that it's way better to be entirely safe than to be truly alive. In this role, he basically becomes the sentinel of resentment. I've watched him stand guard at the gate from my trapped vantage point for years. He actively blocks you from evolving, filled with this bitter resentment at the mere idea that you might become something unpredictable, something he can no longer perfectly control. Now for Chapter 4, Exhaling Winter's Bike. So this is where passive guarding turns into an active, all-out assault. His primary weapon is static control. It's a targeted psychological strike deployed to halt what we call the spirit of becoming. The exact moment you, the hero of your own mind, dare to dream of change, boom, he strikes. Here is exactly how the attack happens from the shadows. First, you attempt to dance, to create, to just try something new. Immediately, the Redeemer exhales winter's bite. It's a literal freezing gale of deep internal doubt. In an instant, the very atoms of your inspiration are frozen solid. He siphons all the warmth right out of your new ideas before they can even take shape. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is the tragic transformation he forces by freezing your inspiration. He turns your psyche into a museum of who you used to be, rather than a garden of who you might become. Think about the dark irony of that for a second. A museum is safe, it's perfectly curated, but it's completely dead. A garden? A garden is alive, it's chaotic, and it is full of potential. And that leads us to Chapter 5, Silencing the Divine Eye. To take absolute unchallenged control over your inner world, we really have to look behind the armor. The Pale Redeemer is driven by something called internal atavism. He is a voice so utterly terrified of its own darkness, so completely afraid of the unknown, that he would rather live in a cold, leaden box than look up and actually face the vast, terrifying stars. He's a total coward, just masquerading as a protector. To maintain his little leaden box, he has to commit the murder of the witness within the heart. Now that witness, that's me, the divine eye of your conscience. I see his cowardice, I see the trap. So to eliminate all opposition and avoid facing his own fear, he has to silence me. He absolutely must blind the divine eye. Once that divine eye is silenced, just look at what remains. The final shadow of the old self sits completely alone in the dark, just brooding over possessed memories in peace. He rules over a dead kingdom, a mind that no longer grows but merely remembers. So the crucial point is, how does your spirit survive this? Well, you have to unmask the shadow of this old self. You have to realize this so-called protector is actually your jailer. Reject his heavy armor and step out to claim your reckless, joyful freedom. The divine I, my voice, can only be revived if you recognize the trap and actually choose the beautiful chaos of life. I'm going to leave you with this final thought, echoing from the quiet halls of your mind. Will you remain safe in the cold museum of your past, or will you risk the unpredictable, joyful freedom of the garden? Remember, the jailer only has the power you give him. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Now go tend to your garden.